la famille.
I love this little video to introduce our brand new show. My name is Alice, and together we're going to share a great moment. We're going to talk about our passion. We're going to talk about the main reason why we wake up in the morning. I'm talking about entrepreneurship. So it's recorded live. It's a test. We are trying a new format to connect with you. Dear founders, dear go-getters, dear supporters, dear YouTube lover, it's totally spontaneous with topics related to hot news or to profound philosophical views. As we know, at the family, you already know, I am with my associates, I am in good company, and that's why we call this show In Good Company. First, guys, Oussama, Nicolas, Matthias, Balthazar, are you with me? Are you happy to be here? Can you just say a word so we are sure you're not avatars?
Of course. Very, very happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
And also in good company, because it's also our mission to invest in good companies.
It makes sense. Totally. Thank you. Okay, guys. So before we start, I'd like to tell you that since 2020, of course, obviously, as many things have changed in the way the family operates. Our mission remains the same. We are still supporting ambitious founders from anywhere. And as of today, we've been selecting and boosting hundreds of startup teams in a kind of hybrid way, if I may. I'm talking about a mixing of physical and the remote interactions. But since COVID and since the world pandemic, basically, we've changed. So the way we used to operate before, we used to meet our founders in real life during a 3-day onboarding in a castle not too far from Paris. We would spend 3 days together, connect with each other, create bonds, work with the founders on their objectives, and then we'd be operating online and remotely, mainly with the founders. Now the things have changed, and so we did. And no more castle, no more physical interactions to connect with the founders we want to accompany, to help, to support. So we've been switching radically, switching overnight, switching to a fully remote model. And we used to say at the family that we are not an acceleration program. We are not an accelerator. But my friends, I have to admit that we became an accelerator. And only fools never change their minds. So we did change our mind on this. We became an acceleration program. And I have to say right now that many things are much more pleasant since we choose this path. First, the founders who are applying to our program at the family are much more international. They come from anywhere because they understood we are no longer in Paris, London, or Berlin. We are fully online. Secondly, because having all of the team onboarded at the same time and online in a program, working hard until the same final goal, which is demode, it creates intensity, it creates a good vibe, that emulation among the crew, and it pushes everyone. And the third thing is that we can finally, with the team, focus only on our founders and not on stupid things like, Alice, tell me how to fix the electricity. Alice, where is the internet? Alice, there is this person at the entrance. He absolutely wants to pitch his startup, etc., etc. So there is no more that. And the focus is really important. So basically, our startup teams are working hard right now to present the most compelling story based on real proofs until demo day. And that's a pleasure to be working alongside with them. All right, this was for my little intro. Now you have the big picture. The family is fully online. And we wanted with the founders, with my associates, to share a moment together and to talk about different things. And I'd like to start by focusing on 3 startups I've discovered recently. But before we switch to this topic and focus on startups that we love. I'd like to get your voice, guys, because I'm alone right now and I feel a little bit lonely speaking. And I'd like to have your words on how do you feel working in this new way, honestly. Maybe Usama, you want to start? I feel you want to start.
Sure. To be honest, I'm super happy when you talk about focus. We have the chance because of remote to be very intense. I'm talking to much more company every day than I was talking before. And that's mainly because you take transportation time out, you take all these things out of your agenda, and so you focus on work. But also in terms of quality of life, we can work from anywhere we want. Nicolas is from Munich because he apparently loves snow. Right now, Istanbul, you are at La Martinique, Balthazar in Chamonix, and Matthias is in his kitchen in Paris because he has been punished by us. So, so I think that aspect, I realized backwards that going every day to the office and being linked to this office, and especially for me, being between the London office, Paris office, Berlin office, if you are in Berlin, you are not in Paris. If you are in Paris, you are not in London. If you are in London, like it was always making someone sad that you are not here. And it was so annoying. Now people don't even know where to find us. I found a Reddit asking how to find us, and it becomes a new "Where is Charlie?" Good luck. Good luck. We will give very few details. So now our time is for our follows. It's online through a very dedicated channel, and I think that's if we can find one good aspect to COVID, and the gift that COVID made us is to have the courage to switch online. We talked about it for years, but we did it because we had no choice, and that's cool.
But at the end, I believe you have to be in this situation where you have no more choice to change. Matthias, jump in. How do you feel?
I feel good. Honestly, I think I agree with most of what you guys said about the quality of life stuff. I see Usama laughing. I don't know if it's because he's thinking about me in my kitchen with onions beneath the computer. But yeah, no, so I think the quality of life stuff is great. On top of transport costs, I think, or transport time, I think one of the fun things is just that meetings are much shorter, or at least the boring meetings are much shorter than they used to be, which is really nice. Like because you don't ask people to go through the city to come and see you, you don't feel bad if you have nothing to say after 10 minutes. And that's 20 minutes per 30-minute meeting that you win. And that really isn't negligible. I do think that some of the stuff is really hard. We're seeing it internally, and I'm guessing that a lot of other organizations are seeing it too. And not just on the social side. I think that when you never see people in person, the degree to which you need to be explicit is just so much harder. If somebody sends you something on Slack you don't really understand, you can't just walk across the office and say like, hey, what did you mean by this? And just resetting expectations as to what a reasonable response time isn't that straightforward either. So I think going from oral to written, and then from a lot of implicit body language stuff to hyper explicit, and from synchronous to asynchronous isn't all that easy. But I'm very excited by what we've been doing so far. I think that it'll make it. We used to say, I think the thing that it will exemplify it the most is we used to say that you couldn't understand the family without following one of us for 1 or 2 months. And then once you'd followed us for 1 or 2 months, then you understood how he worked, which I guess was really cool in terms of the mystique that it created, but it was also not the easiest way to onboard new employees. And as we go to a more explicit, written, and straightforward process culture, I'm sure we'll be able to onboard people quicker, and that they'll get what we do a lot faster than they used to.
Yeah, so as for me, I've never liked being at the office, actually. I've always carefully chosen...
You were almost never there.
Yes,
It was
I
like
was
I mean,
almost.
it's like Santa Claus when you were at the office. Like you would come up randomly. I think in my first year and a half at the office, I saw you like 3 times.
Exactly. And
How
I've
we do
always
it,
I've
for
always
for
picked
big investors.
occupations that didn't make it mandatory to be at the office at all. I know some people prefer to commute every day, fixed hours, because it makes them more productive. I enjoy the freedom. That being said, so what's really changed for me is not the fact that I don't go to the office anymore, because I didn't even before we had a pandemic. What has changed is that it's been made much clearer to the outside world that the family is not a Paris-based organization. So before moving to Munich recently, I spent 5 years in London. And I remember so many times people in London would write a message to me saying, "Oh, in Paris, can we get a coffee?" And I would reply, "But I live in London, so we should have a coffee when you're back." Because people assume that your citizenship determines where you're based. I had an American friend in London who had the same problem. People always assume he was in California and not in London. And so it was very difficult to convey that message that no, we're not in Paris, we're in various cities across Europe, we're traveling a lot. And now it's been made obvious because the digital lifestyle has become more mainstream. And we've had this communication about the family closing its offices down, which means that people assume that they can't find us in a specific place. They have to ask where we are. And the more time goes by, the more we make odd choices, like moving to Germany or moving to the Martinique, as Alice recently did. And I'm sure there'll be many other options that we'll explore in the coming months and years.
Yes, and the joke was that Usama lived in the cloud, and somehow Matthias too lived in the cloud, taking planes from city to city to meet entrepreneurs. And now it's become a reality. We're really living on Zoom, and you'll see we're slowly becoming investing in more advanced setups, so you feel like we're in person. And the thing that strikes me most with going remote is that our job was actually remote with most founders. Once we get to know them, every interaction is by email, on Slack, or by phone call. And none of the best founders would actually travel to see us unless it was really important to have social events like dinners. And making it fully remote made that very clear for everyone. And before COVID, we already had startups all around the world. It was just very difficult for us to build the trust and the good relationship in the beginning of the work we do with startups. But when it worked, it was super successful. And the switch to a batch model, fully remote, is a good way for us to start these relationships with startups at scale, because it gives us 2 months to be very intense with a lot of founders at the same time and build a relationship that we'll be able to leverage on the long term when they raise their Series A, when they go international, when they need to hire senior people. That's where we show all the value that the family can have. And actually, going online was just a chance for us to have more processes into helping the companies the way we did before. So I like to say that before we were doing orfèvrerie in French, so we're like crafted jewels, which is still the magic of the family when we work with companies. But now we are able to start these relationships with many more companies from all around the world. And in the past 2 months, we've started relationships with companies in the Philippines, in China, in Israel, and all around Europe, when that was complicated before. And this is like really the most exciting opportunity that we've worked on together. both for founders that will be able to compare themselves or emulate themselves with some of the best founders elsewhere, and for us as a business, because we strongly believe that entrepreneurship is just at its infancy, and they will find incredible companies wherever they are.
All right. Okay, guys, we're on the same path. Now I'd like to switch to another topic. We've been talking about remote. Let's talk about these new startups that are part of our batch at the family. So I've picked up 3 startups that I like. I've been exchanging with the teams, and I really like the stories of these teams, of the people, their dreams, their missions. I'd like you to comment on my three top, I would say. And if you have some you want to talk about, feel free to talk about it. My 3 startups that I wanted to highlight right now. The first one is called GDPRFolder. GDPRFolder. We've been exchanging with him. So basically, GDPRFolder, as its name is pretty obvious, is helping you to be GDPR compliant. Who wants to talk about bureaucracy, administration, and these kind of things? Not a lot of people, but it's compulsory now. We have to be GDPR compliant, and you have to find the service that will help you feel free, feel comfortable, feel at peace with this topic, because this topic is really a problem. You can have to pay something like a fine of 6,000 or 15,000 euros because you are not GDPR compliant, because someone went on your website, said to the authority that you are not GDPR compliant, then the authority is coming to you with a letter saying you're not GDPR compliant. And what does it mean to be GDPR compliant? Actually, it means a lot of things, like a real burden. And when you are an SMBs and you have so much things to focus on, you don't want to have to deal with one more thing like that. And what I love about GDPRFolder is actually the guy who is behind. So it's not a typical founder, right? It's a university teacher, a guy who's been teaching at university for 25 years. 25 years at university, focused and passionate about data privacy. It's rare, okay? And the thing is that he started helping some friends to be GDPR compliant, and then he started to watch our content, watch our videos on YouTube. He started to make friends with some programmers, and he started to automate all of what he was doing to help the SMBs to be GDPR compliant. And he created basically a super simple solution that is very focusing on SMBs, because all of the solutions that you can have are really focusing on the big budget, which are in the big corp as a target. Anyway, Jacques, his name is Jacques. For me, the beauty of his company, it's him, basically. When you start, it's mostly the founder. And the beauty is that he embodies the merge of the two worlds, like the world of the law, the world of the administration and the institution, and the startup world. And I hope that he will really make it and be successful. And that's why it was my first one. Voila. Any comments, guys, on this one? Maybe you've seen him and you want to say a few words about Jack?
Yeah, well, one thing that you don't mention about Jack is that he's been an entrepreneur multiple times before. He doesn't turn up entrepreneur at the age of 55 or 60. He's had the success being GDPR and the data privacy for years. What he understands better than anyone else is that the GDPR is not something just focused on Google and Facebook. Actual SMBs are going to receive fines because they're not yet compliant. And this product is just a very simple way for anyone to get an audit that you can show to the authorities to say that you are actually compliant, plus the simple fixes that you can make. And this is actually a giant market. You have hundreds of thousands of SMBs in each and every country that need to be up to date and to show a token of proof to the authorities.
It's much easier to put a fine to an SMB than a Google. So at the end of the day, every authorities everywhere is trying to find efficiency. Now the law is here. If you go against Google, you go against an army of lawyers. If you go against a small, medium enterprise, they don't have the infrastructure. So that's where software is so interesting, is that software can give power to people to comply without the burden of really thinking about comply, especially on something like GDPR that is very self-declarative, because nothing is really unallowed in GDPR. What is unallowed is to not declare what you do to user. So like that, we create disclaimer that nobody read, that are written by a software that nobody really know what is saying. And all of that create a loop of compliance, and people can say that this law is protecting privacy of people. That's a success. But yeah, and the funny thing is, when we operate at scale, one of the things in this badge that amazed me is that every caricature about every nationality is true. I know it's like we should be more subtle than caricature, but on the large scheme, when you have big numbers, caricature always become true. So this guy is the typical Belgian entrepreneur. He do incredible things, but he's too humble to say it, because in Belgium we have this culture of being super, super humble. And it's so funny because when I did my first call with him, I don't know, I messed the company in the list. I didn't see what he was doing. And so I was discovering real time. And I was reading about him, and I have the pitch in the same time. And there was like this big gap between what he was saying and what I was reading. So for example, he was saying, oh, I know a bit about GDPR. And I was reading 25 years of university articles about GDPR and working in the commission about the law and blah, blah. And I was reading and listening to him, and I was like, where this speech coming from? And on the other side, there is other nationality in our batch that are much more confident at pitching. Just the fact that some of them have been raised in the US is so funny. Some of them have been some of their years in childhood in the US, and their pitch is so confident and so self-declaratory. So it's cool, but we have also a diversity of profile, and that we are able to attract something else than 20 years old doing a SaaS business.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for your comments. Okay. So
one thing on that is like, on the GDPR isn't just about Google and Facebook, is even in this batch, we've already seen a couple companies that are, I'd say, pretty risk-taking companies. So SaaS companies where we have relationship with the management team and stuff, who aren't willing to try new products because they're scared that the products aren't compliant. Because GDPR and data protection policy doesn't just apply to your company, it applies to all of your suppliers, including your software suppliers. And so typically when we're talking about SMBs, we're not just talking about like super outdated industrial companies, because for some reason people, when you talk about SMBs, they usually think about abstract companies that they haven't heard about, like in the German Mittelstand or whatever. But we're actually talking about loads of startups that try to be scrappy at the beginning, but that lose out on a lot of important deals because they can't prove that they're compliant. And Jacques also helps with those guys.
Actually, it's an interesting approach, because there's this idea in the old world, it was necessary to reach a very large scale to be able to make the investments into dedicated logistics infrastructure, for instance, logistics platform, or compliance with complicated regulations, complex regulations. And this is precisely why authorities, and especially tax authorities, would focus on the little guys, because they knew the investments to be compliant were only made by the large organizations. But now with software, with all these things being brought about by software companies, suddenly it makes compliance or logistics or whatever on available for everyone at a cheap price, and it's easy to deploy within your organization and to mold your supply chain so as to comply. And plus, if you're a small organization, it's easier to make the decision. Try to sell such software to a large organization, you have to go through committee after committee before someone finally decide to buy your solution. If it's an SMB or a startup, the CEO can decide to buy it in an instant because they'll be convinced that it actually creates value and it's cheap, and if it doesn't work, you can still reverse the decision, uninstall the product. And so that's a complete revolution in terms of who's the most compliant. In the past, the large organizations were compliant and the small ones weren't, which explains why authorities were eager to focus on those. In the future, thanks to solutions like GDPRFolder, like Jacques' solution, it will become easier and cheaper for small organizations to be compliant as opposed to large ones. And in time, hopefully, it will inspire authorities to change their behavior and focus once again on the large organizations as opposed to the SMBs.
Nicolas, I have a question on GDPR. At the end of the day, GDPR is here to help Europeans really protect their data privacy. And it's been something that is a success, a win for Europe to exist as an institution and to have created a standard that is adopted by the rest of the world. So I want your thought on that, Nicolas.
I'm not really sure. The fact that Europe has designed, enacted GDPR, and is now implementing it by issuing fines and so on, has sent a strong signal that there's a region in the world that really cares about personal privacy. And this has been used by privacy advocates in other regions of the world, especially in the US, to make the case that if Europeans are doing that, then maybe we should enact new laws to protect the privacy of American citizens and to prevent Facebook and Google from collecting too much data. The problem is when Americans start to get interested in what Europe is actually doing, they're taking a closer look and discover that it's mostly a stupid law that makes pop-ups appear on your screen all the time because you have to agree that yes, you can collect cookies data through cookies, and so at the end of the day, nobody's really convinced that GDPR is actually advancing the cause of privacy in day-to-day life. What it advances is the idea that we should do something about privacy, but I'm confident that at some point, some country or some government or some city, I don't know, will come up with a smarter approach to effectively protect privacy, which is not about writing very long agreements that you have to, very long statements that you have to agree with, or having those windows popping up on your screen all the time, which is annoying and nobody cares. And you just want to say like, get all the data you want and let me access my content.
I think some of it will like self-regulate, honestly. Like when you look at how annoyed people were when there were the fake rumors about the WhatsApp change in privacy policy. Everybody
bullshit.
Well,
I have a theory about that. My theory is that I have quite a lot of experience about privacy, and I think there are small segments of the population that really care about privacy. Basically, you have the hackers who really want to remain, anonymous. You have the members of the elite, because those people are used to everyone wanting to know more about their private life, so they're very private and they want to protect that privacy. But most ordinary people don't really care. What they crave is convenience, and they're always ready to let a company collect data in exchange for cheaper products or more convenient products. The problem with Facebook is different. It's because Facebook is perceived as having done so much harm, the least of it not being helping Donald Trump be elected. And so many people actually hate them for that reason, because they stir anger and they help convey conspiracy theories, and they've contributed to Trump's success. But because you can't really, because it's too divisive to focus on those issues, they're looking for Facebook's weak points. And one weak point is that its business model relies on collecting a lot of data, and therefore it can be perceived, if you frame the narrative accordingly, it can be perceived as a threat for everyone's privacy. And suddenly people sound like they care about privacy, but what they really care is about Donald Trump having been president for 4 years.
Yeah, and I think, Matthias, like, seriously, if you look at the WhatsApp thing, it's really in our close circle. It's not mainstream.
No, honestly, it's not. Signal had 50 million downloads.
Yeah, and how many users?
No.
And how many users 2 weeks after? Let's take the bet. So we take a bet in 4 editions of In Good Company. We look the usage number of this app, and we see what happened.
I agree that a lot of it has subdued already, and now Trump is gone, and I think there was a lot of anti-Facebook stuff. But it does seem that at equal price, people value privacy. And you will have some companies that take advantage of that.
Yeah, I don't think every company that I saw having a privacy pitch end up not having a product, because the only way to really make privacy is to have a really strong UX and usability become really low. It's like security. If you want a real secure computer, I can tell you that you are not going to use your computer, because at the end of the day, most of us don't really care about being hacked. And even on things that were super private, like pictures, and like when all these Hollywood actresses got hacked and the sex picture end up online, everybody was like, oh, that's the end of their career, I don't know what. And then 1 week after, nobody even remember the name of who got hacked. If I play a game, can you tell me the actress that got hacked at that moment?
I mean, I think everybody got hacked.
No, but basically there were only few actors that really get shame in public, including Jennifer Lawrence. And
yes, I remember that one, because she was playing in movies that were targeted at a young audience.
Children. Yeah.
Yes.
And nobody cared, and she still have a great career. She's still one of the best actresses that ever lived. And if she one day listen to this show, I will be very happy to have a dinner. so yeah, I think privacy is overstated. And by the way, if you look GDPR, it's the biggest joke. It's make pop-up. You can declare anything. You make agreements that nobody read. It's just this passion we have in Europe, where we think that rules is a law and law is action. And the problem is working the other way. If you really want to protect privacy of people, you need to don't let them use most of the product they are using. And that's unacceptable for people.
Also, it inspires trolls and angry people that think that because GDPR exists, they can harass small organizations like us and send notices that we should remove their name from some mailing list, or remove their picture from a video that was shot at the family's office. And so GDPR creates this polarizing mood when angry people use privacy to express anger in a particular way.
Yeah, but in the meantime, as you said, it's a signal, it's a strong signal that we take into account the privacy of people. And it's a signal relatively to other places. And you all think of China and the way they use your data, the fact that you can pay with your face.
Alice, here my point is that we are really good at this fake signal in Europe. And the truth is that the reason why we will never regulate privacy correctly is because governments are addicted to not respect privacy, and that's everywhere government spies on people. Everywhere this spies is super, super important for the safety of everyone. And because the safety of everyone is online, they are never going to go back. It's just too addictive. It's too addictive to go and look the computer of someone and look inside his darkest secret before meeting him. It's too addictive to have all this information of everyone online about what they buy, what they do. It's a dream of like before. When you were a government and you target someone, you had to pay intelligence officer to do profile, the profile of people. Now it takes 5 minutes, and no government in the world is going back on that. And because of that, it's just virtue signaling. And maybe it makes a transition with your next subject about ads. Virtue signaling is super important, but maybe you can talk about your second startup.
All right, all right. So my second choice is Boon.today. So by the way, GDPRFolder, you can go and check them. You just have to write GDPRfolder.eu. And now I'm going to focus on Boon.today. So basically, it's a guy called Shai, and Shai is passionate about the advertising industry. I don't know how you can be passionate about the advertising industry, but he is definitely has been working there for years, and he decided to go on a break and to travel during a year. And with his wife, actually, they've been teaching English to kids in Asia, and he started letting grow some other passions, like how can I make an impact in my life, and how can I serve something that is bigger than me. And we know that path because we all go through this kind of moments once in a while in our life. And when he get back to work after a year, he decided to merge his two passions, which were advertising and making an impact, really being involved in humanitarian causes. And so he's smart. So what he did first is that he developed a label called Ad for Good. So basically, if you put money on a campaign and you put at least 1% of this budget into an NGO, then you're labeled Ad for Good. And now it's an international and renowned label that you can that you want to have on your campaign. And if you want to go further, then you have to go through its platform, which is Boon.today, and basically it makes it super easier for any advertisers to create the perfect campaigns when it comes to digital campaigns. This pop-up that we were talking about that will show a product and say, okay, if you want to contribute to this NGO, thanks to L'Oreal or La Roche-Posay or I don't know what, just click on this. So it aligns the interest of the brands and the cause. And the consumer at the end can see that. And today's consumers, they all want to see brands put their money where their mouth is. Okay, this is really, it's been a trend for years, but it's been accelerated these days with all the movements that we've seen on social media. And we want to see brands involved in real causes and making something out of their millions of budget that they put to hack our brain. So that's Boon.today. What do you want to comment on that, dear Daedalium?
So the funny thing is that it shows that we are not dogmatic at the family, because we took a social enterprise, and I think that there is something fundamental is that sometimes context is more important than principle. So I I still be very pissed off by social enterprise in general. I don't think that anyone needs to qualify itself as social enterprise. But the fact that a part of the money of the advertising is used for this kind of goods, why not? Because it's just an industry that anyway already produce a lot of money. So if a bit of virtue signaling can align interest and create a positive effect and a bit of sustainability in the non-profit world, I think that's great. And that's why more than what this company is labeling itself, what is important for me is what they are doing. And they can have a real impact, and that's more important than anything else for me.
Balt, any reaction on Boon.today?
Except that it's an exciting startup we started working with. I think that indeed there is a huge demand from the general public to see corporations comply with a bit of more of sustainability and social benefit. And as of today, it's quite difficult for these corporations to find the right way to show that they care to the public, if they actually care, which is something that is not a given. And Boon.today offers the opportunity to do it on a very specific segment, which is advertising. And by building a label, Ad for Good, which basically stamps on an ad that the company gives 1% or more to different charities, they're able to create a positive flywheel where the brand gets more and more recognized. The public wants to see more of it, and corporations become forced in some sort of way to use it, the same way that other labels have been built, whether it's or being an organic product or being or any other label that you know of. So I think there is a good opportunity to, and I think it's a foot in the market where eco spending on ads, they get to become the middleman between people that pay for advertising and people that have advertising space. Of course, that's for everything that is not Google and Facebook.
Yeah.
I have a funny anecdote. This morning, precisely, my son, who's 9 years old, asked me, he grew up in a world without a TV, so he's used to watching videos exclusively on YouTube where you can pass most ads after a few seconds. And so I really worry about the advertising industry when these generations reach the adult age, because they'll be used to skipping ads all the time and not paying attention. And so this morning he asked me, like, why are people working to make these ads if we all skip them when they're offered to us? Like, how does it work? I don't understand who's making money in that scheme. And so I had to explain, like, even if you skip, you've seen the brand and it makes an imprint in your head, and maybe when comes the time to decide which product you buy, you will decide for that brand because you have a vague memory of having seen it somewhere. So it is, oh yeah, it makes sense. So those people who make the product will pay the advertisers and so on, those who make the ads. But what I sense is something that I rejoice in, is a lot of pushback against intrusive approaches to advertising products. And I think that any efforts like Shai's effort with Boon.today that tries to reconcile the advertising world with the general public is actually critical for the industry.
Totally. I was talking about hacking the brain, but for me, it's exactly what I feel when I'm watching YouTube content and there is someone asking me if I want to make money out of not paying taxes, for instance. Anyway,
investing in startups.
Yeah. So there is another thing regarding what you said, Usama. You said, okay, usually I'm not pro auto-labeled good tech for good kind of things, but I have to tell you that we called our show In Good Company. So what is good and what is bad, it's related to the people speaking. And I see what you mean when you say there is a kind of moral sense that they take for granted for themselves. When you label yourself, I'm a tech for good company, there is something weird. I get that, but somehow we did the same with this show. Any other comments on this company, on advertising, on Shy, on the potential? Do you really think that brands? Yeah.
On Nicholas's points, I'm a bit older than his kids, but I think the degree to which we've grown filtering out the ads is pretty crazy. We have this other company in the portfolio that's building a community of people who are trying to declutter their homes. And so the first thing that they did was help people understand how many objects they own, like individual objects. And they were telling me, like, yeah, most people brag about the fact they have very few objects, and there's like this sort of minimalist trend going on. And I was telling them, like, honestly, I think I'm a pretty good example of that. I don't think I bought anything online outside of books, which not that many people under the age of 25 can say. I haven't bought anything outside of books on Amazon, which is...
Yeah, but you are born old.
Yeah, maybe I was born... I don't know if I was born very old or very young, is what I'm trying to say.
What do you mean? You don't... Are you buying stuff offline as well?
No, I just don't buy that much stuff.
Okay. Me neither, actually. But
very minimalist on that, or maybe very technical equipment for skiing.
But this is something I learned from Usama. Like your goal should be to be able to move with just one suitcase only.
That's one of our startups, by the way. The name is Object, and they are helping anyone to learn how to get rid of their bad habits in terms of consumptions, which is a disease or even an addiction of our times. And I really feel like that I've already adopted this new way of life. Basically, I moved from Paris to the West Indies with my suitcase and a hand suitcase. There's nothing inside, and I'm living very happily my life. All my life is in my suitcase. I like this way of life.
It's official now that you moved.
No, but I'm feeling so good here. I'm recharged.
Did you tell your parents?
Yeah, I told them. I told everyone, like, look, you cannot be stronger than your context. And when your context is great...
trying to convince everyone to go is why she's telling everyone.
But just about the consumption thing, I can tell you a funny story. So me, since a very long time, I don't like to own objects, but I love to buy them. And especially, I'm a very big addict to téléachat. A long time ago, I was living most of my life in hotels.
How can you say that I was born old? You were born like a dinosaur. Who does?
And I was opening on TV this show that where they sell American products. I swipe my kitchen, blah, blah, and I was going and buying them. And because I don't want them, because I know it's a thing, I was offering them to random people I know. And so I was like thinking, oh, Balthazar will love this swipe thing. And I was just sending to his address and buying him. And I felt so happy to buy and not own. So there is two different diseases. There is the disease of buying and the disease of owning. But they can be very separate. You can just love making gifts.
I think your disease is a bit rare. I think it's a rare disease.
It's fine. But what I'm saying is that we, like, this minimalist thing started a long time ago. One of my friends started to tell me about Marie Kondo 10 years ago, and we were looking at objects and asking ourselves if it provides happiness in life, and if not, taking them out of the house.
Pay attention, Usama, because we're switching to the energy topic. If you're talking about Frenchy, I'd love to talk about that, but I guess it's another kind of topic. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Let's talk about satellite and space.
All right. So yeah. Let's switch before it becomes too much of my favorite topics, energy and so on. So let's move to the space. My third startup that I wanted to talk about is called Dark. For the moment, there is no website. It's really still really at the beginning, and the two guys, like very, how to say, highly talented guys who've been working in the missile industry, actually in the anti-missile industry, and they've been part of the teams that were designing this anti-missiles. I don't know how to say it. Anyway, the thing that explodes, the thing that is supposed to kill. Anti-missiles. And what they thought is, okay, we are two engineers and also soft architect and focused in the defense industry. They've been really passionate about finding solutions and passionate about exploring space, as any, I would say, kids learning this in this field. And they tried this idea. So this is the idea. You can now today launch a rocket in the way we are launching a missile. So imagine you don't have any longer to launch a rocket vertically, but you can launch it horizontally from a plane. What does it mean? It means that it's cheaper, that you can do it from any airport, and that basically you can send satellites. It's becoming much more accessible to send satellites. And these two guys, for me, they are super bold, super ambitious. They need to raise a lot of money because this prototype is not like a quick and dirty thing you can do on the side. There is a barrier to entrance, and I think
the thing, Alice, is that now a lot of money is not that much money. Doing a company like that 10 years ago would have been hundreds of millions of investment. And now we are talking a company that can launch something pretty achievable for 5 or 10 million. So we changed 10x fold the amount of capital necessary. And when you see how much we put money to build software that do better marketing or things like that, you think that if someone can do a SpaceX for 10 million and prove that he can do it, it's worth the risk. And that's totally new because 3D printing, 3D simulation, the fact that lot of knowledge have been open source, SpaceX example, all of that makes space more accessible than ever. And the other thing is that in terms of integrity and the fact that you can launch from anywhere, it means that you are not dependent on one country. And that's very important. Because the problem is that when you build space infrastructure as a private company, then you are very dependent of one country here, because you can launch from any airport in the world. It makes you super, super free to operate at a global scale and opening a multiple point of access and give to everyone their autonomy in terms of space as a service. You can offer London, you can offer Paris, you can offer Sweden, you can offer South Africa, you can offer any country that wants to have his own spaceport in any usual airport where any military plane can take off from.
When it comes to conquering new territories, we have bad memories. See what I mean? I mean, no. In the history of conquering new territories, it's the beginning of wars, it's the beginning of trauma.
You mean space? The good thing is that space is big. So it's not a limited territory. Apparently, by the way, apparently it's much bigger than we think. So I think that's
for now
why,
we don't know that there's anyone there.
Yeah, so that's why from a space perspective, you are not like, it's not like a land limited, and that's cool.
Yeah, but following this idea of the past period of the crusade and the discovering new territories and the conquest and what it brings in the past. It's just that it was only one person conquering a new territory. And I really think that democratizing and making it possible to much more than one is preventing this kind of bad things and traumatic things to happen. This is the way I see it. You see what I mean? The more you have people able to conquer the space, the less...
To be honest, you can think the opposite. If every country can want to go in space, then they can start to fight in space.
Yes, true.
Yeah, I know it's depressing. If people want to do bad things, they always find a bad way. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing. If you think more long term, we don't have that much we don't have much incentive to do war anymore. Like war is becoming something very, like only Islamic State wants to make war to people these days. It's very retarded people in a place nobody care about. So China doesn't want to do war to people.
Maybe with Taiwan, they really want to.
Yeah,
reunite with Taiwan.
My feeling is that Chinese knows very well how to scare Western. This is why they play with Hong Kong these days, and this is why they play with Taiwan and all of that, because they go to our fears. But I don't believe that anyone in China wants war, because they like money, they like their comfort. Everybody loves comfort. And by the way, one of the things that always amazed me is why people don't.
They are torturing people in camps.
Yeah, but it's not changing the. If you do war in space against the US, everyone's life change. It's not only the people in camp that you consider as non-human, and that's why the wage for war becomes so high. Is because before during Second War, like Europe, when Europe went to war, only few people decided of this war, and it did not impact that many billionaires and that many powerful people. You didn't have to convince like Shamat. If US try to go on war, I'm sure Shamat will go on Twitter and talk to people about doing Reddit to avoid it. And there will be a lot of people like that have a lot of audience, and that's totally new. Huh? Government are a bit lost with all of that. Huh?
It was actually a very powerful drive of support behind Donald Trump. The idea that we should stop waging useless wars in faraway countries, and they just want to be at peace.
It's the only good thing Donald Trump did that we can all agree on. No?
Yes.
I mean, when he was elected, it was also a big thing behind Obama in theory.
Yeah, but that got lost in translation.
I have a question for Balthazar, because Balthazar, you did the selection basically of Clyde and Guillaume. What convinced you that these guys could actually support such a big dream?
To be completely fair, I met them through Usama. I already had a good feeling with both Clyde and Guillaume. And when I met them, I also felt that they had the energy and the craziness that is required to build such a business. And then I think understanding the different trends made me think it was completely feasible. One of the funny things is that all these businesses are run by billionaires that want humans to go to multi-planetary living, because that would save the planet save our species. And so the rockets are becoming bigger and bigger to send hundreds of people to Mars, when actually all the technology of things we send to space are becoming smaller and smaller. And instead of sending very large satellites, we now send micro satellites that could fit in a small box. And so the rockets become less and less suited to what we're actually sending to space. And their solution would allow for very flexible and cheap capabilities to be sending microsatellites to the right orbits into space. And I think that space, I heard Jeff Bezos mention it before, but the infrastructure to build businesses into space has not been built yet. And of course, launching satellites is a big part of it. And the
There is a
cheaper it
police
gets,
somewhere or an ambulance. I think it's Daedalium. Yeah. Sorry, go for it, Balt.
I don't know if where it froze, but building the infrastructure to let a lot of people send things to space will be an amazing opportunity for other entrepreneurs to build crazy space businesses.
Hmm.
And to tell you a bit about Clyde, because I'm not even sure you are all aware of it.
He's the brother of another entrepreneur.
Yeah, so he's the oldest brother of Max in our batch that is building a VR headset with Unai. And the story is that I know, sorry for the ambulance, but I know Clyde because when I met Max was 15 years old, and I had an instant connection with Max. And I told Max, what would be cool? I'm going to spend 2 months in Silicon Valley this summer. You should come with me for 2 months. And he was 15 years old. Sending him with a guy named Usama in Silicon Valley for 2 months can seem a bit off. So the whole family came to screen me and to review me. And Clyde is the oldest brother, and we spent a bit of time and we became friends and we started to go and learn to shoot things together because he's an elite shooter, and so he teach me how to shoot things that move. And I started to go on Saturday shooting with him, and that's how he started to think about building a company, because he got inspired by what we did with his little brother. And he was like, okay, if my little brother can do it, but I know since he's a baby and I don't find him that impressive after all, why not me? And I love that. He shows so much how much confidence can come from very random situation. This guy never imagined that he will be an entrepreneur. He was a very happy employee, didn't have that much ambition, but his brother started this fire inside him that, yeah, I want to live my life differently too.
Yeah, I have a big crush on the company as well. Okay, so I gave you my top 3. I love all of them, but I have to say I really appreciate these teams. I will be talking about other teams in the next in Good Companies. Do you want to share with us while we're still on the batch some of your startup crush?
Okay, I'm going to speak about Unai.
Go for it.
But yeah, the funny thing in this batch is that we have a lot of hardware companies. Unai is one of them, but it's not the only one we will introduce that do something that is totally new, is hardware as a service. It's the idea that they build hardware, software, and business model in one loop. Because before, hardware was seen as a consumer business where you sell the hardware and you make money upfront from customer, and you don't have that much room for iteration, and you don't have that much room to try multiple versions. And hardware becomes so efficient in China, Shenzhen. You can go at the end of factory and iterate on hardware almost like you iterate on software. And because you build hardware, software, and the business model together, it can create a new kind of hybrid company that are very interesting to build, because they don't have this problem where you need to build 1 million and you forget a transistor and then everything go down and you are fucked and your hardware company is bankrupt because you raised 6 million in VC and you did one mistake that killed you. And that's why historically hardware company were so hard. And now fast prototyping and all of that make it more accessible and more like software. It's the softwareization of the world. It's super, super exciting.
Cool. All right. Thank you, guys.
And one thing that you didn't mention because you forget, because you've lived with him for a while now, is just how cool and random Max's story is as well. Max and Gabriel, actually.
Yeah, we met them. They were in middle school. Max started to iterate about open source project when he was 16, and now he's 19, and he's a very, very special entrepreneur.
And one of the very, I think, ironic things about the whole Unai story is that we complain about the toxicity of the ecosystem all the time. But if French subsidies didn't exist, we probably never would have met Max. So we have to think how boring it is to fill in forms to get French grants.
tell the story, because it's too elliptic.
Yeah, so the background is just that at the family, I think if you read any of the content that has been published since 2013, and especially at the beginning when I was in high school, so quite a long time ago, a lot of the content is around how different aspects of the ecosystem is toxic, and one of the aspects is the whole process to get public grants and like the weird incentives that public grants create. And so when Maxime released the first version of his headsets, which wasn't at the time, he wasn't really sure what to do with it, if he was going to publish it open source or to try and commercialize it. I think it was Gabriel's mom, so Gabriel's Maxime's co-founder, Gabriel's mom told them that they should be applying to those grants.
It's not Gabriel's mom, it's the mom of one of their friends that is not here anymore in the project.
So the mom of a third co-founder at the time, who since isn't in the company anymore, but so she suggested that they should apply for grants in whatever region they were in near Paris. And Maxime, who'd seen a couple of Usama's videos, emailed Usama saying, hey, I'm 15 and I managed to build Oculus level headsets for less than $100. My friend's mom is telling me to apply to all these different grants. Do I really need to do this? And Usama received the email and he wrote to all of us saying, this 15-year-old kid told me that he did something that is theoretically impossible. So either we have an incredible entrepreneur or he's just a complete scam and I'll have lost the trip to the French countryside. And so he ended up going, who did you go with again? I forget. To Provence to see if the guy was serious.
With Balthazar.
Yeah, just a few of you.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how we ended up finding Maxime. So if the person he turned to was, if the mom had told him, oh, you should speak to this angel investor, and France was a more mature ecosystem, we might not have met him.
Yes, but it demonstrates the value of highly polarizing messages. Don't take public money, government money, resonates so much because it's so counterintuitive and so radical that it was bound to attract the attention of someone like Maxime and contribute to the connection.
That's true.
Cool.
Yeah. And speaking about radicals, Matthias, what happened this week?
Yeah, as dear audience, we're still in the process of testing out formats. And so because I spend too much time on Twitter and I was trying to find a way to justify all the time I spend on Twitter, I decided that my format would be essentially just discussing the stuff that I wasted my time reading. Or not wasted. Hopefully it means that I didn't waste it because I'm speaking about it now. And so there are a couple of topics that sort of dominated the news. Every time we do this, so we're still settling on the pace at which we do these episodes, but assuming we do monthly, it will always be heavily biased towards the most recent news. So usually what happened in the last week. I think what we've observed in the past year is just that news cycles are getting shorter and shorter. If I told you that we learned the news that Trump paid $70 in taxes less than a year ago, it just seems like something that at most will end up in history book. Nobody really remembers that story because since then there's been an uprising in Washington, the most controversial election probably in recent memory, or definitely in recent memory, probably in the last century. And everybody just forgets things very quickly, to some extent, us included. And so when I'll be talking about Twitter gossip, it'll mostly be last week's Twitter gossip, unless it's something that's completely out of the ordinary. And as far as Twitter gossip goes, I think nothing took as much attention away from everybody in the VC or tech industry as the Reddit versus Wall Street story. So for those of you who don't know, and I saw, as a side note, I saw a story or I forget if it was an Instagram story or Twitter or a tweet today that said January 2021 was a great month for people who love explaining things, and we're another great month for people who love explaining things. So I'm going to try not being that person. Hopefully you can have a discussion about it. Sorry about that. It's not. There's a little bit of background noise. We're in an old Parisian apartment, and the boiler is literally heated by a flame. So now it stopped. Somebody needed hot water in the flat, or the neighbors, I don't know. Anyway, Robinhood Reddit versus Wall Street. So a couple months ago, this guy on Reddit posted something saying that there was the opportunity to realize the biggest short squeeze in history. So the idea was that if people put enough pressure on a stock by appreciating the price or by increasing the price, a lot of the people who were short the stock, so who were betting that the price would go down, would be forced to close their position by buying the stock, which would drive the price higher, and more people would have to close their position, et cetera, et cetera. And so for a while, that person was more or less alone on Reddit. And then you had a mix of different things. The stock became a bit more popular, and a couple of big name people, including Brian Cohen, who's the founder of Chewy, decided to take big positions on the stock. And so recently, now a week ago, you had this incredible movement of people who coordinated and put a 50% hole in one of the biggest hedge funds and most successful hedge funds of the past year, called Melvin Capital. And a lot of people in finance were worried that they couldn't just be playing among themselves now, and that you had a lot of people at home who were essentially building this crazy and decentralized hedge funds. And honestly, when you're reading most of what they are reading, or most of what they are writing, there was a slightly condescending tone, which was like, they're not even in it for the money, and it's really hard to anticipate what these crazy, irrational people are doing. And I think that to some extent that's true. When you read the sort of conversations that these people are having, a lot of it seems to be about having fun and belonging to a cause and sticking it to Wall Street. And so it was really fun to see the different dialogues. The funniest thing of all is that a lot of the people who seem to be instigating this stuff are billionaires themselves. So like not hedge fund billionaires, but people who are making money off the markets. Osama mentioned Shamat earlier, and he's definitely one of those. But it's been pretty crazy to see the impact that it's had. And I think that honestly, it's pretty much anything anyone on Wall Street's been talking about for the past week, or anyone anywhere, to be honest, in tech and finance. And so right now, it seems like it's calmed down a bit. I haven't looked at the GameStop price today. I can actually do that now. But it seems like it's no longer...
It's 300.
It calmed down because nobody's allowed to trade anymore, no? Robinhood cut all these trades, so what can people do?
People can sell, but they can't buy.
Yeah, so it's just going to go down, and the friends can short now and make the money they lost back.
Have you been buying?
What?
Have you been buying some shares?
But me, I have a friend that follow all this bullshit all the time, and he sent me a message at 115 and said you have to buy. And because I trust him, I did it without understanding what was happening at all. But I was like, yeah, if he's telling me this, why not?
How much?
I buy, but the funny thing is that I bought very little, but with a lot of leverage. So I invested a lot, but my account was 20x, but I put only 1,000. And then then after a few hours, he sent me a message saying sell, and I sell, and he's paying my holidays next week. But the funny thing is that then after I went and read everything, and me, I'm amazed about two things. First, what you are saying about all the people that are trying to have fun is true, but there is some very sophisticated analysis on this Reddit that are much better than most of the broker notes we are exposed to.
Yeah, the original piece is really good.
Yeah, it's insane, like the quality of that. And the second thing is that a lot of people are making money in a kind of casino gambling thing, but it's hard to blame them. I mean, the level of blaming from Wall Street is insane. And they are asking now for regulation and things. It's so funny. It's so funny that when the rules is not in their favor, they are like, oh my God, we need more freedom. But when freedom really hit them in the face, when nobody wants freedom anymore. And me, I like freedom. So I like that people can do big mistakes collectively and things like that. But I don't think regulation is going to be that way. And the fact that Robinhood impeached people to trade is, it's, again, we are the
Yeah, but
year.
on that topic, I think they had very complicated PR to handle, and I think they didn't do it very well initially. But the reason,
freedom is attacked everywhere.
yeah,
Freedom
but
is
in their
around
case, it wasn't blocking freedom.
around transparency. Freedom, now Robinhood attack freedom on market stock. It's insane. Balthazar has a loop with his friends talking, and one of his friends was like, yeah, because one of the friends was is giving a very technical explanation about why Robinhood had to do that. And I understand as a business, they had no other choice than doing that. And one of his friends replied, yeah, but okay. But once again, in 2021, freedom lost. And freedom is losing every battle. Like health, lose. Tax, lose. Don't leave, Matthias.
Enough said.
Yeah.
It's freedom to live.
Fucking thing, freedom is losing. And nobody fucking give a care. Nobody. Like, yeah, freedom. Who needs freedom when we have happiness?
There's this concept of a God complex. Very powerful or very wealthy people who do reckless things because they have the impression that nobody can touch them, like Harvey Weinstein raping young women because he feels untouchable. And I think social media has the same impact on ordinary people. They might not be powerful, they might not be wealthy, but the impression that you're doing something that everybody else is doing in connection with you as a network can be very compelling and make you forget that it can have consequences. There were the riots at the Capitol on January 6th, and the people were parading around the building and taking pictures and of themselves destroying government property, and they didn't even realize that with their picture being on the internet, they would be arrested and go to jail. And the way you say, good for them, they shouldn't have done it. But on the other hand, I have to admit, I understand the feeling like you're part of a crowd and you're doing something that's forbidden, but everyone is doing it at the same time. And at some point you forget about the consequences and just want to take part in the adventure, which I think is part of the story of what happened on Reddit regarding GameStop.
Yes, yes, but in some way I find it funny to realize what is a rule and what isn't. If the guy from Wall Street Bet had been a hedge fund manager and he had gone to all the LPs in the world saying that he wanted to take a short position for 10 billion in private, he would have had the right to do it. And then he would have taken a massive position of 2 billion against Wall Street, against GameStop, and then it would be legal. What the guy did is just making the process completely open and said to the public, actually, these hedge funds are doing the wrong bets and they're going to lose at their own game. And now it's supposedly illegal because he said exactly the same thing. And the other
I'm not sure
the
idea is that it's illegal. The idea is that Robinhood
a lot of people are asking for regulation, saying that actually colluding against the stock just for manipulation, just for price, is illegal. And,
no,
and
but they are talking about going after the guy on Wall Street Bet and that he should be prosecuted. And the funny thing in this kind of thing is that it's going to be a rule of law, not from a concrete measure, but from something like intention or manipulation. And I hope for him he didn't do a lot of profit himself, or I don't know if he did a lot of profit It's going to be. I hope he did really a lot or not a lot, because if he's in the middle, it's going to be it's going to be so fucked.
But on the other hand, it might be. In French, we have this expression "victoire à la Pyrrhus," so it's a Pyrrhic victory. I think in English, when you win, but in the end you lose, and it's exactly like the record companies sued users who were downloading illegal MP3 files from the internet, and some of them were sued for millions of dollars for copyright infringement, and the record companies attracted support from big stars like Metallica and other artists. But in the end, there was a big backlash, and it was really like the last stand of the old world. And in the end, the crowd won and forced the music industry to completely transform its approach to distributing music. And so I think that might happen at the moment. And I don't know exactly how, but maybe those guys will pay the price for having been pioneers in, toppling giant hedge funds. But that will be a Pyrrhic victory. And after that, there will be a reconsideration from both.
Yeah, the big difference here is that regulator is very powerful, contrary to music. And the fact that SEC decide to take retail investor off market and force everyone to just buy ETF is real. It's real. Like, you know what? Everyone out. Go.
No trading single stocks anymore.
Yeah, not trading single stocks anymore. Now only go to cryptocurrency until we regulate them. It's really a possibility. And again, my big thing is I don't know why, but nobody cares for freedom anymore at big scale. Like we admire China. Okay, let's take COVID as an example. COVID started in China. China response was, let's put everyone at home and just look at them, and nobody moves. And then the whole world just applied that because it started in China. But none of us is Chinese, and none of us respect the way Chinese respect because we don't have the crazy reinforcement. So at the end of the day, we end up having a totally unadapted response to a situation that is inspired by a model we are totally unable to do. And why? Because it came from the country that fascinated the most our politician around the world. Because our fucking politician thinks that people are bad because they don't follow rules. But not following rules should be a fundamental right. It should be like, by the way, most of the rules should not exist in the first place. So why should we be proud of being able to follow what the government say when everyone is lost anyway about what to do?
And what could we have done better?
I don't know. What I'm saying is that we didn't even think about it. We didn't even think about massive test strategy. We didn't even think about investment in healthcare. We have this fucking COVID since 1 year. Where is the massive plan to increase capacity of our hospital?
There's an interesting thing. If you believe some articles, Taiwan is the country in the world that has done the best against COVID. They really managed to contain it and to make people comply with good practices without infringing on individual freedom. And the fact that they're so close to China and so threatened by China, and they're exactly the same as China, except they have embraced liberal democratic values as opposed to authoritarian Communist Party values. And so they really, it's like they took the best part of Chinese, culture or civilization or approach to managing the public place and merged it with this set of values that they really care about, because if they renounce it, it will weaken their position towards their big and threatening neighbor. And I disagree that China is the only country that has managed to handle the virus, but I think that we our countries, the most developed countries, are so indifferent to what's happening elsewhere in the world. We think we haven't anything to learn from any country because we're the most advanced, the most developed, and so on and so forth. And it's true for the US, it's true for European countries. I'm amazed by the incapacity, the inability of European countries especially to learn from what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a second topic I want to talk about based on Twitter's latest news. So literally in the past 24 hours, and actually since this morning, 7 a.m., I think most of what Twitter was talking about was the huge win that Clubhouse got by getting Elon Musk on for an hour. And I think more generally, Clubhouse has been a pretty recurring topic on Twitter for the past couple months. I think it's always funny when people go back to Twitter to discuss other social networks, and the only thing they ever have to say about Twitter is how bad of a product Twitter is, but they're still here 13 years later or something. But anyways, the Clubhouse has been getting all this attention, and a lot of people have been saying that it's the most exciting thing to happen in social consumer for quite a long time. And I think that honestly, potentially since Instagram, there hasn't been a social network that has got this much hype, especially outside of very local social networks like Yik Yak and stuff. And so I was curious to hear not so much your take on Elon Musk being on it, because it seemed like it was a pretty general interview about Elon Musk, but just on Clubhouse in particular, if you guys have been using the app at all, and how you think it's going to. I can't hear you, Sama, so I'm just going to finish the sentence. How you think it's gonna deal with going mainstream now? It's not just an insider's game.
Yeah, Elon said that he's not believing in alien yet. I was so disappointed. I had such a big admiration for this guy until that moment. Why he wants to go on Mars if he doesn't believe in the aliens. But joke aside, yeah, Clubhouse is big, but we were talking before with Nicolas and as before Matthias and Balthazar came. We were asking ourselves a question where people do find time to go listening for hours on Clubhouse, because it's super addictive. I tried the product and it's really addictive to listen to people. And then you don't spend like 1 hour listening to something in accelerate and taking what you want. No, you really end up spending 4 hours, 5 hours at night on Clubhouse. Little bit like when we were listening radio show when we were a kid. So I don't know. Balthazar, are you in Clubhouse?
Yes, I'm in Clubhouse, but honestly, I'm never able to listen to it. And I was quite a big listener of podcasts, where I love that I'm able to select the subject, I'm able to switch to the next conversation, I'm able to rewind, I'm able to go faster, and I love the consistency of it. With Clubhouse, and I actually don't really understand why people get so hooked to it. And I think Clubhouse has mastered the strategy of stages as a service like nobody else. And they do it by opening the gates to only the select few in the Silicon Valley that everyone admires. Then they ask other people to join. Then these people say, oh, the level of insight I get from these conversations, I learned things that were not public. It was absolutely incredible content, which basically just means it's gossip from the Valley, because everything that they say that is smart,
which everybody cares about.
Yeah, everything that people really care about, they publish it. They want to sound smart, so they're going to write a blog post about it. They're not going to keep it in a private. So everything that people really get there is numbers from the last fundraising of whatever company in the Valley. But they've been really good at instrumentalizing this social thing. So everyone wanted to be on Clubhouse, know what could get there. And you heard about it all the time on Twitter. And then you get these invites and you feel a bit special and you get on it, and then you feel forced to listen to it a little bit to try to see what happens there. And for some people, you listen it. I'm sure Usama spends his night listening at it because it's the only hours where he's actually free to listen. Plus, it's the only hours where you get content from the Valley, because in France, every piece of content that is in Clubhouse is like worse than bad. And so now they're raising their Series B. So just before they raise the Series B, they open the gates, and like you see all these notifications of people popping in Clubhouse. But for me, I'm not sure yet of how much retention people are going to get with the actual product. I can see a larger vision where they become the easy part where content gets created, but I don't see live conversation being the best way to consume content on the consumer end. Then honestly, I think they're backed by the smartest guy in the world. So there must be something tangible behind it that I'm not seeing yet. And for me, getting Elon Musk to join is just a growth strategy now. It's building more FOMO, and people commenting saying, "Oh, I've got 5 invites if you want to listen into Elon tonight," which is a really nice strategy. It's like when Twitter was going after the Pope and after Barack Obama, because one person brings millions of followers that wouldn't go anywhere else if he was not there. And so I really think Clubhouse is mastering this strategy, and a lot of other companies should get inspired by it, building exclusivity on one side and a lot of marketing on the other sides, which might seem counterintuitive because you could let tremendous amounts of people come in and use the product, but you're specifically restricting them so that they become really engaged the day they're accepted in the social network. Otherwise, you don't see the value, you don't feel yourself privileged to be in. And it's really like a Ponzi game of status, which I see them also doing in the Valley on consumer products. They launched like this new brand for coffee called Cometir, and like everyone, like from Patrick Collison to Zach Weinberg, are saying like it's the best thing they ever had. And you go on the website and you can't order. And it's just super frustrating. And then of course you can get referred by other people. But like that mechanic works, and I think it's really inspired from Clubhouse. And probably I think we should try one day to do a show ourselves in Clubhouse to see how it works and what type of feedback we get. But to me, I don't really get it as a listener.
But there was a precedent of this approach quite a long time ago, which was Quora. The first replies on answers to questions on Quora were by very famous people, and now like it's still out there, but it's not the big success that you could envision at the time. So
it's quite a success, Quora.
I'm sure they monetize well, but
yeah, they never got the monetization, but I don't think they really need it anyway. It's more to be good.
To be honest, I've been totally in the FOMO.
Quora was better than it says now.
I've been in the FOMO of Clubhouse as well. Everybody's telling me, "Are you on Clubhouse? Are you on Clubhouse? Do you want an invitation?" Okay, I want an invitation because everybody's excited, so I want an invitation. So I've been there. No, I didn't find any moment in my life to listen to it, but I can totally see when you are sure that the quality of the talks is here. I can see the why it's interesting. I can see why you want to go and have a live right now with top quality content. So many times I've been wondering, switching the radio stations to find something interesting, and even on the podcast, you really need to know which one is the right one to be able to listen to something good. So if you make me feel sure that if I go there, I'm going to have some quality content, and I can see the interest of going on Clubhouse. But it depends on the topic, because The topics I'm talking about every day, all day. If I have to hear it at night again,
Yeah, but
I won't.
your token of trust is who is speaking. So you could also type the same names guy in Google and watch a YouTube conference or podcast or something else.
As for me, I admit I'm not using Clubhouse, but I'm a late adopter for whatever product there is. So, but I've read a lot about it, and it seems obvious to me that just like there is a social version of newspapers, which is either Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, there will be a social version of, and there's a social version of TV, which is Facebook and YouTube, and there will be a social version of radio, which was bound to happen at some point. So I'm sure they have a shot at this. They will be competing at some point with Spotify and maybe YouTube as well, and Twitch, and I don't know, because there will be that merge between video and audio. But on the other hand, my impression is that it's a bit lagging behind to rely on FOMO in Silicon Valley when you're trying to build a worldwide product. Interestingly, Facebook was not born in Silicon Valley. It was born in university campuses on the East Coast, which is something that more people could rely and that made it easier to build bridges with other parts of other cultures and other parts of the world, whereas Silicon Valley appears to me more and more insulated. And so any product that's molded in that particular world and takes its DNA is bound to encounter barriers to growth at some point, I think.
Yeah, let's see. I have the feeling that even if it's Silicon Valley born, the founders are doing a big effort to open to other geography, maybe pushing Europe.
And other subcultures.
Yeah, and even like say a bit nasty that they raise the Series B, so they just open the gate. At the end of the day, there is a lot of weird subculture on it already. So let's see. It's interesting to see where it's going, because if there is one team that can win that, it will be them. I don't know if they have the right product, but they have at least the money to iterate as much as they need. They won that battle. They won the battle of having the right to try to win this war. So
a big opportunity for them will be when people start to commute again, which is not the case at the moment because we don't commute. But when people start to commute again, it will restore those big chunks of time that can only be dedicated to listening to things. And so at that point, the hottest programs on Clubhouse will be at 9 in the morning and, you know.
But will we be commuting again? That's the question.
Well, not me. I don't go to the office. But
not me neither.
Some people will be forced to by their managers.
Yeah, true. All right. Any other topic, Matthias, or we switch?
Maybe one last one. So just one note on Clubhouse. I think one of the things that Anderson did very well is that they didn't limit it to tech gossip. And I think, I'm not sure how they structured the deal, but I'm pretty sure that one of their funds, which is called the Cultural Leadership Fund, invested in Clubhouse as well. And it's quite funny, the sort of deliberate effort that they've made, because you have a lot of very high profile tech people merged with very high profile athletes or artists from the African American community. And so it feels like almost a sort of Andreessen Horowitz like incubation program of sorts, where you have, it feels like hard things about hard things. You know, it's like tech with quotes from rappers. So it sort of feels like the initial guest for Clubhouse was that vibe.
Yes, and the first controversies around Clubhouse involved Andreessen Horowitz because it was Balaji saying bad things about that New York Times journalist. Private conversation with Felicia Horowitz, and they were under a lot of fire after that because they were accused of inspiring hatred toward journalists.
One last topic before we close, maybe.
One of the things I'm wondering regarding that, though, is whether tech people have been brought into battle because of the Facebook 2016 election, or if it's because they've become too powerful and now they think that they can actually impose their views to the rest of the world. And I see like Balaji and all the others, they basically became a media and they have so much reach. And I wonder whether them plus the Jay-Z and whoever you want are actually thinking that they're strong enough to impose what they think to the rest of the world and to set up the norms, which to me is the opposite of what happens on Reddit and then actually on the internet culture. And I don't know if it's a chicken and egg problem, what came first, if they're forced to battle or the opposites.
I think the battle against them is pretty hard. Like everything outside the mistake or anything, the level of scrutiny of this company and the level of backlash we take for anything we do is pretty insane. And I think Obama have been the best worst enemy of the tech industry. That because Obama made friends with all these guys and give them a platform, they naturally become enemies of a lot of people, and that started the cycle. I think everything starts with the fact that Obama, at one point, was so fascinated by Silicon Valley that he made it a political platform. And by the way, in France,
he needed the money.
Yeah, it's a bit the same with, but more than that, he needed the money, but he really loved these people. He felt connected with them. Like in his biography,
campaign using their tools. So
yeah, in his biography, each time he talks about one of these people, he's really talking highly of them. Brian Chesky, like he has a lot of admiration for Brian Chesky. I think as a person, he was really fascinated by them. And then it started a cycle that we cannot go out of, because now you are with them or against them.
Yes, but it's been like that during the whole history of the US. Capital-intensive industries favor Democrats, progressive parties, politicians, because they don't care about labor law. They don't employ that many people, so they don't really care if you have to pay people more and provide them with healthcare coverage. And they need free trade because they need to export their products. Otherwise, they can't really make money at scale. And Democrats are in favor of free trade, and they're in favor of tightening regulations on the labor market, which tech companies don't really care about. So it's an alliance that was bound to happen.
All right. It's been spontaneous. It's been simple. It's been a conversation. It's been fun to follow and to be with you guys.
And in the coming weeks, we'll bring guests for part of the program.
Exactly. So what I want to say is that next time it will be really live, meaning that it will be on YouTube and you will be able to interact, ask all of your questions, pitch your startup if you want to, and participate in the debates. Much more fun, right? It was cool. Thank you, everybody.
See you next week.
Yeah. Bye-bye.